The glass shattered against the marble floor, and Amara Mensah watched from the doorway as her best friend jumped back, eyes wide with terror. If someone celebrated your death, would you destroy them, or just disappear? Amara's voice cut through the silence like a blade. She stood perfectly still in the entrance of her own home, surrounded by white funeral tents and flower arrangements that spelled out her name. I chose option 3. I came back. Amara clutched her chest, stumbling backward into the velvet sofa. Kwame's face drained of all color, his mouth opening and closing like a fish drowning in air. A JoJo, still holding the dress she'd been trying on, Amara's dress, pressed herself against the wall as though she could disappear into it. This is witchcraft, Amara finally gasped. You were dead. The doctors said. The doctors said my brain activity was minimal. Not gone. Minimal. Amara stepped further into the room, her legs still weak from 28 days of immobility, but her voice steady. I heard every single word you said. All of you. For 26 days, I lay in that hospital bed, completely aware, completely conscious, while you planned my funeral like it was a celebration. 28 days earlier, the machines had beeped steadily in the private hospital room in Accra. Amara had lain motionless, her body a prison, her mind screaming against walls no one could hear. Dr. Ajay had stood at the foot of her bed, speaking in that gentle tone doctors reserve for delivering bad news to families who've already given up hope. Her brain activity is minimal, he'd said, and Amara had wanted to scream, wanted to move, wanted to do anything to show them she was still there. We've done everything we can. Kwame had sighed, a sound heavy with resignation rather than grief. How long do we keep her like this? Those words had pierced through Amara like ice. Not how is she, not will she recover, but how long do we keep her? As though she were a broken appliance they were considering whether to repair or discard. Amara had moved closer to the bed, looking down at Amara with cold assessment. My son has suffered enough. 3 months of this expense. These machines, this room, for what? She's already gone. You've been so strong, a JoJo had said, touching Kwame's shoulder, and even in her paralyzed state, Amara had recognized the intimacy in that touch. It lasted too long, the fingers pressing too familiarly into his flesh. Kwame had looked at his wife's motionless form and said words that would echo through Amara's consciousness for days. She was always fragile. Never really built for this life. Fragile. The word had ricocheted through Amara's mind. She'd wanted to laugh, wanted to scream, wanted to grab him by his expensive shirt collar and shake him. Fragile? She'd put herself through university selling provisions at the market. She'd built a business from nothing while he'd squandered his family's money on failed venture after failed venture. She'd been the one holding everything together while he played entrepreneur with her silent funding. But she couldn't move. Couldn't speak. Could only listen and remember. That night, after the hospital staff had dimmed the lights, Kwame and a JoJo had stood by the window, silhouetted against the glow of Accra's city lights. When will you tell them about us? A JoJo had asked. After the funeral. A respectful amount of time. A JoJo had laughed, a bitter sound that made Amara's immobile heart ache. Respectful? Kwame, she never knew you. Not really. You said it yourself, she was just there, in the background, cooking and cleaning and smiling. She never challenged you, never pushed you. What kind of marriage is that? She was a good housekeeper, Kwame had replied. That's all she ever wanted to be. In her paralysis, Amara had felt something crack open inside her chest. Not her heart breaking, that had happened years ago in tiny fractures she'd ignored. This was different. This was rage, pure and molten, filling every corner of her consciousness. I built everything, she'd thought. Everything you have, everything you are, I built it. And you don't even know. The days had blurred together after that. Day 3, Amara had brought fabric samples, holding them up against the light. Nothing too expensive. She was a simple woman. Simple funeral. Day 7, a JoJo had opened Amara's jewelry box, trying on the gold necklace Amara's grandmother had given her. She won't need these anymore. Day 10, Kwame had met with a lawyer, signing papers to transfer Amara's savings account, the one he knew about, into his name. Just a few thousand cedis, he'd told the lawyer. She never worked, really. Just household money. Household money. Amara had wanted to laugh. If only he'd known about the accounts he couldn't see, the business he didn't know existed, the empire she'd built in secret while playing the role of dutiful wife. Day 12 had been the worst. Mama, Kwame, and a Jojo had gathered in the hospital room, discussing funeral arrangements as though Amara weren't there. As though she were already a memory to be managed rather than a person who might hear them. The wake-keeping should be 1 night, not 3, Mama had said. No need to waste money on someone who contributed so little. Contributed so little. Amara's father had died when she was 16, leaving her mother with nothing but debt and 3 younger siblings to feed. Amara had dropped out of school, worked 3 jobs, sent her siblings to university. When her mother had died 5 years later, Amara had been running a small cocoa export business, partnering with her uncle Kofi. She'd met Kwame at a business conference, been charmed by his confidence, his family's name, his promises of partnership. Marry me, he'd said. We'll build something together. But what he'd meant was, give up your business, be my wife, make me look successful while I spend my family's money. Everyone had told her the same thing. A married woman doesn't need a business. Focus on your home, your husband. So she'd done what they expected. She transferred the business registration to Uncle Kofi's name, told everyone she'd sold it, and pretended to be exactly what they wanted, a quiet, supportive wife. Except she'd never actually stopped running the business. She'd just run it from the shadows. Day 18, lying in that hospital bed, listening to them plan her funeral, Amara had made a decision. I will not die here. I will not let them erase me. I will not let this be my story. Day 21, the night shift nurse, Ifewa, had been checking Amara's vitals when it happened. Amara's right index finger had moved. Not a twitch, not a spasm. A deliberate, controlled movement. Ifewa had gasped, dropping her clipboard. Dr. Ajay! Dr. Ajay, come quickly! Dr. Ajay had rushed in, running tests, checking responses. This is extraordinary. She's coming back. Should we call the family? Ifewa had asked. Dr. Ajay had hesitated, looking at Amara's face, and something in her expression, some tiny shift he must have caught, made him pause. Not yet. Let's be certain first. Over the next 3 days, Amara had fought her way back to consciousness like a drowning person clawing toward light. Every movement was agony. Every attempt to open her eyes felt like lifting mountains. But she'd kept fighting. Day 24, her eyes had opened for 3 seconds. Dr. Ajay had been there, and his face had transformed with joy and relief. Amara? Can you hear me? Blink once for yes. She'd blinked. You're going to be okay, he'd whispered. You're going to be okay. Day 26, she'd been fully conscious, still weak, but aware. Dr. Ajay had sat beside her bed, and she'd managed to speak, her voice a hoarse whisper. Don't tell them. Your family? But they're planning. I know. Tears had streamed down her face. I heard everything. Every word. I was awake, Dr. Ajay. The whole time. His face had gone pale. Dear God. You heard them? She'd nodded. Ifewa, standing nearby, had gasped. You were conscious? During all of it. Every conversation. Every insult. Every plan. Amara had closed her eyes. My husband is having an affair with my best friend. His mother thinks I'm worthless. They're planning my funeral like it's a relief. What do you want to do? Dr. Ajay had asked quietly. Amara had looked at him, and in her eyes had been something hard and bright and unbreakable. I want to go home. I want to go to my funeral. The next 2 days had been a whirlwind. Physical therapy sessions that left her shaking and exhausted. Dr. Ajay had secretly contacted Uncle Kofi, who'd arrived with a briefcase full of documents. Amara. Uncle Kofi had gripped her hand, tears in his eyes. We thought we'd lost you. The business, she'd said. Tell me everything. Uncle Kofi had smiled. The cocoa exports are thriving. The real estate holdings in Kumasi and Accra have tripled in value. The total assets? $47 million. $47 million. While Kwame had called her savings household money. And Kwame's company, she'd asked. Bankrupt without your investments. You've been funding his logistics company for 4 years. He thinks the money comes from his mother, but it's all been you. I can pull everything right now. Not yet, Amara had said, her voice cold. Let me see their faces first. Day 28, she'd checked out of the hospital through a side entrance. Dr. Ajay had walked her to the car. Are you sure about this? You could just leave. Start over somewhere else. You have the money, the resources. And let them erase me. Amara had looked at him. Let them tell my story? Let them say I was just a simple housewife who died quietly. No. Ifewa had hugged her tightly. Some ghosts need to haunt the living. The Uber had dropped her off at the gate of her own home. White tents filled the compound. Caterers moved between tables. Chairs stood in neat rows. A massive banner stretched across the entrance in loving memory of Amara Mensah. She'd stood there for a moment, looking at her own memorial, and had felt nothing but cold clarity. Inside, through the window, she could see them. A Jojo holding up 2 dresses, both from Amara's closet. Which one for the wake-keeping? Mama Yer had barely glanced over. The cheaper one. She wasn't worth the expensive fabric. They'd laughed. Amara had walked through the gate, through the compound, and opened the front door. And now here she stood, watching them scramble and stammer, watching the color drain from their faces, watching their carefully constructed lies crumble. If you're watching this story and wondering what happens next, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss how this unfolds. Drop a comment below. What would you do if you heard your loved ones planning your funeral? Now, let's continue. Kwame finally found his voice. Amara, this isn't what it looks like. Really? Amara's laugh was sharp. What does it look like to you, Kwame? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my husband and my best friend planning my funeral while wearing my jewelry and spending my money. A Jojo dropped the dress, her hands shaking. We thought you were dead. The doctors said. The doctors said my brain activity was minimal. You heard what you wanted to hear. Amara moved further into the room, each step deliberate despite her weakness. Tell me, a Jojo, when did it start? When did my best friend decide to sleep with my husband? Was it before the coma or after? The silence was deafening. Before, Kwame finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. 6 months before. Amara felt the words land but refused to let them show on her face. 6 months. Half a year of betrayal while she'd smiled and cooked and played the perfect wife. And you? She turned to Mama Yer. You called me a burden. Said I contributed nothing. That I was simple. Mama Yer lifted her chin, some of her old arrogance returning. You were a housewife. What else were you? Let me show you. Amara pulled her phone from her pocket, her hand steady despite the tremor in her legs. She pulled up documents, turned the screen toward them. Mensah Global Exports. $47 million in assets. 6 properties across Ghana. The largest cocoa export operation in the Ashanti region. Kwame stared at the screen. That's impossible. You don't work. You never worked. I worked every single day. Amara's voice was quiet but fierce. I built that company from nothing while you were failing at every business venture your mother's money could buy. Where do you think your logistics company got its funding, Kwame? Your mother's accounts were empty 5 years ago. The color drained from Mama Yer's face. What are you saying? I'm saying every Sadie that kept your son's company alive came from me. Every payment to your creditors. Every salary for his employees. Every office rental. Me. The simple housewife. Kwame collapsed into the nearest chair, his legs giving out. Why didn't you tell me? Because you never asked. Amara felt the weight of years pressing against her chest. You never asked what I did during the day. You never asked about my dreams, my goals, my life before you. You saw what you wanted to see, a quiet woman who cooked your meals and didn't challenge you. That was easier than seeing a partner. This is madness, Mama said, but her voice had lost its strength. You're lying. You're making this up. The front door opened, and Uncle Kofi walked in, followed by a man in an expensive suit carrying a briefcase. Uncle Kofi, Amara said, never taking her eyes off her family. Please tell them. Uncle Kofi looked at Kwame with something like pity. Every word is true. Amara built Mensah Global from a single cocoa farm her father left her. When she married you, everyone told her to give it up. She transferred the registration to my name to keep the peace, but she never stopped running it. Every strategy, every deal, every expansion, that was her. The lawyer opened his briefcase, pulling out documents. I'm Samuel Owusu, Mrs. Mensah's attorney. As of this morning, all investments in Kwame Mensah Logistics have been withdrawn. The company is insolvent. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. You can't do this, Kwame said, his voice breaking. That company is my life. No, Amara said softly. It was my money keeping your fantasy alive. I can, and I have. A Jojo grabbed her purse from the sofa. I can't do this. I can't be here. Of course you can't. Amara watched her former friend move toward the door. You never loved him, a Jojo. You loved what you thought he had. Now that it's gone, so are you. A Jojo paused at the door, tears streaming down her face. I did love you. You were my sister. Sisters don't sleep with their sisters' husbands. Sisters don't try on their sisters' jewelry while planning their funeral. Amara's voice didn't rise, but every word cut. You loved the idea of what I had. You never loved me. A Jojo fled, the door slamming behind her. Mama found her voice again, and it came out venomous. You ungrateful girl. We took you from nothing. My son gave you his name, his home, his family. And this is how you repay us. You took me from nothing. Amara laughed, and it was a bitter, broken sound. I came from hard work and determination. I came from a father who died building something better for his children. I came from a mother who showed me that strength doesn't require volume. You didn't give me anything except years of subtle cruelty and the belief that I should make myself smaller to make your son feel bigger. She turned to Kwame, who sat with his head in his hands. I loved you. I really did. When we met, I thought I'd found a partner. Someone who would see me, really see me. But you never wanted a partner. You wanted an accessory. Someone to prove you were successful, capable, a real man. You needed me to be small so you could feel large. I didn't know, Kwame whispered. I didn't know you felt that way. You didn't ask. In 8 years of marriage, you never once asked me if I was happy. If I had dreams. If I needed anything. You asked what was for dinner. You asked if your shirts were pressed. You asked me to be quiet when your friends visited because you didn't want them to hear my village accent. Amara felt the tears finally come, hot and angry. I erased myself for you. I made myself invisible. And you still didn't see me. The room fell silent except for the sounds of the caterers outside, still preparing for a funeral that would never happen. Uncle Kofi touched Amara's shoulder gently. Let's go. You don't need to do this anymore. But Amara wasn't finished. She looked at each of them in turn, Mama rigid with shock and fury, Kwame, broken and small in his chair, the lawyer, professional and detached, Uncle Kofi, concerned and protective. You can keep the funeral arrangements, she said finally. Bury the woman I pretended to be. Have your ceremony. Mourn the housewife who never talked back, who smiled through everything, who disappeared into your expectations. She's dead. She died in that hospital room while you planned her funeral. What will you do? Kwame asked, and for the first time, she heard genuine curiosity in his voice. Perhaps even the beginning of understanding. I'm going to live. Loudly. Visibly. As myself. I'm going to run my company without hiding. I'm going to make decisions without apologizing. I'm going to take up space in the world. She moved toward the door, her legs stronger now, fueled by adrenaline and liberation. And I'm going to do it all without you. Amara, wait. Kwame stood, reaching toward her. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. I can change. She looked at him, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time in years. He wasn't a monster. He was just a weak man who'd been raised to believe his comfort mattered more than anyone else's humanity. There was no hatred in her heart anymore, just a vast, echoing emptiness where love used to live. No, she said simply. You celebrated my death, Kwame. You brought your mistress to my hospital room. You planned my funeral like it was a relief. Some things can't be fixed. Some things shouldn't be. She walked out of the house, through the compound with its white tents and flowers, past the banner with her name, and into the bright Accra afternoon. Uncle Kofi followed, and the lawyer, and they got into the car waiting at the gate. As they drove away, Amara looked back once at the house that had been her prison, dressed up as a home. She didn't feel triumph. She didn't feel revenge satisfied. She felt tired, and sad, and strangely free. The months that followed were a blur of activity. Amara moved into a penthouse apartment overlooking the ocean. She held her first board meeting as the public face of Mensah Global Exports. She gave interviews, appeared at business conferences, signed deals that expanded her company's reach across West Africa. People were shocked. Where had this woman come from? How had no one known about her? The business community buzzed with speculation and admiration. Some called her ruthless for destroying her husband's company. Others called her a phoenix, rising from obscurity to claim her rightful place. Kwame's logistics company shut down within 2 months. The employees found other work. The office space was leased to a tech startup. Kwame himself moved back in with Mama, taking a job as a sales manager at a trading company, the kind of position he would have scorned a year earlier. Ajojo left Ghana entirely, moving to London to stay with relatives. On social media, she posted inspirational quotes about new beginnings and lessons learned. She never mentioned Amara. Mama withdrew from her social circles, the shame of her son's downfall too much to bear. The women who'd once gathered at her home for tea and gossip found other places to meet. Before we continue with how Amara rebuilt her life, if this story is resonating with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment sharing your perspective. Would you have destroyed them or disappeared? And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories about resilience and reclaiming your power. Now, let's see where Amara's journey takes her. 6 months after walking out of her funeral preparations, Amara stood in the Makola market, the place where her business had first begun. She walked through the stalls, greeting vendors by name, stopping to examine fabrics and spices. Some recognized her from the news and whispered. Others just saw another customer. At a fabric stall, a vendor called out, "Madam! Beautiful Kent, fresh from the weavers." Amara stopped, running her fingers over the intricate patterns. The colors were bold, defiant, alive. She bought 3 yards, more than she needed, just because she could. Just because she wanted to. As she walked through the market, carrying her purchases, she felt something shift inside her chest. Not healing exactly, that would take time, but recognition. She recognized herself again. The woman who'd sold provisions at 16. The woman who'd built a business from nothing. The woman who'd survived because surviving was all she knew how to do. Her phone rang. Uncle Kofi. There's a new opportunity, he said without preamble. A cocoa farm in Côte d'Ivoire. The owner wants to sell. It would double our production capacity. Set up a meeting, Amara said, smiling. I'll fly out tomorrow. You sound happy. I sound alive, she corrected. For the first time in 8 years, I actually feel alive. That evening, she returned to her penthouse. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, and the ocean stretched out endlessly before her. She stood on her balcony, the Kent fabric draped over her shoulder like a victory banner, and thought about the question that had started this entire journey. If someone celebrated your death, would you destroy them or disappear? She'd chosen neither. She'd chosen to live, fully and unapologetically. She'd chosen to stop making herself small. She'd chosen to tell her own story instead of letting others tell it for her. In the distance, she could see the lights of the city coming on, thousands of lives intersecting and diverging, each person carrying their own hidden stories. How many other women were making themselves invisible right now? How many were erasing their own accomplishments to make someone else comfortable? How many were dying in small ways every day, believing it was love? Amara pulled out her phone and opened her social media. She'd avoided it for months, but now she felt ready. She posted a photo of herself on the balcony, the sunset behind her, the Kent fabric bright against her dark skin. The caption read, "They planned my funeral while I was still alive. I heard every word. This is my resurrection story. For every woman who's been told she's too much or not enough, you are exactly right. Tell your story. Live your truth. Take up space. The world needs you visible." Within an hour, the post had thousands of responses. Women sharing their own stories of erasure and emergence. Men apologizing for the ways they'd made partners feel small. People asking how to support the invisible women in their lives. Amara read through the comments, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of sadness this time, but of connection. She wasn't alone. Her story wasn't unique. It was one note in a symphony of women who'd been told to disappear and had chosen instead to be seen. A message came through from an unknown number. She almost deleted it, but something made her open it. "I'm sorry. I know that changes nothing. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I needed you to know that I see now what I couldn't see then. You were never invisible. I just refused to look. I hope you find everything you deserve. Kwame." Amara stared at the message for a long time. She could respond with anger, with righteousness, with all the words she'd saved up over 8 years of silence. Or she could do something more powerful. She deleted the message and blocked the number. Some stories didn't need closure. Some stories just needed to end. She went inside, poured herself a glass of wine, and opened her laptop. There was work to do. Deals to close. Futures to build. A life to live that was entirely, completely, unapologetically hers. Outside, the city hummed with possibility. Inside, Amara Mensah smiled. Not because she'd won, not because they'd lost, but because she'd finally come home to herself. The funeral had happened, in a way. The woman who'd made herself small, who'd hidden her light, who'd believed that love meant erasure, that woman was truly gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone whole, someone who'd learned that the most dangerous thing you could do to a woman was make her believe she was nothing. Because when that woman wakes up and remembers who she really is, when she stops making herself small and starts taking up the space she deserves, when she tells her own story instead of disappearing into someone else's narrative, she doesn't just survive. She transforms the world. And Amara Mensah was just getting started.